All right, so the Batman's been out for a few days, and I made my spoiler-free reaction. I saw it on opening night, and I had a lot of good things to say about the Batman. But like I said, it was a spoiler-free video, so I didn't really get to dive into some deeper stuff. That's what this video is going to be for. So if you guys have not seen the film yet, go check it out, and then come back to this video. Put it in your watch later, and then we'll talk about it. All right, so let's dive in here. Let's talk about the Batman. So the first thing I want to cover is going to be the cinematography. Technically, it is beautiful. The Batman is a visually appealing film. I mean, there are so many interesting cinematic choices in the lighting and the framing and the shadows or lack thereof. I thought that each scene seemed like it was very intricately thought out of how it was going to be filmed. There is just a lot of great looking shots, the color grading and everything in this film. Everything just looks so good. The score is so epic. It's now gotta be the most iconic Batman score. At least it feels like it. I mean, it is definitely a really exciting main theme in there, and like scoring overall, the music in the Batman, it's done really well. And the use of Nirvana's music, like Something in the Way, it's just perfect. I really liked how it was used for the tone of the trailers for the Batman. And then now that we've seen the film, and now that we've heard how that song and that music kind of all fits the feeling of the movie, I'm really there for it. It really makes perfect sense. And I think that that is just great, and it goes along with the whole sound design of the film. The Batman's action feels impactful and sounds impactful. There are moments of fighting, lots of explosions. The Batmobile itself, when that thing's getting started up and when he's driving, and that chase scene with the Penguin, it sounds great. The sound design is impeccable, and that was also apparent right away in the first trailer. So I love all that. It is, it feels like this film has a really great script that definitely had a lot of thought going into it with the dialogue and everything. And I guess that kind of will lead me to my next point here, which is going to be about characters and the story. I mean, it feels like this is a good story that flows. It's a long story. I mean, this is a 3-hour film, so like it's not perfect. I mean, there are some times when I'm thinking about how the story went that like I thought it could have ended, and I felt like maybe that third act was sort of shoehorned in a little bit, but like it made sense, and I'll get to that momentarily. But overall, I thought that the story was paced pretty well. I mean, it made use of its long runtime because important things happened and characters got to be developed. So I really appreciate that. The Batman tells just a really interesting story about how Batman is a detective. It tells a story about Bruce Wayne and Batman, but also about Gotham City. I really enjoyed the way it was executed. I like that Batman is a true detective in this film, and I like that he is trying to help the police and do his own heroic duties to stop the Riddler, to find out who he is, what he's planning on doing, stuff like that. It was done really well, and the main plot really is that the Riddler is a serial killer who is hidden behind a screen, behind disguise, and he's killing politicians and police officers, public officials, and he's making sure everyone sees it, and he wants it to be known. He doesn't want him to be known, but like he almost does, because it's all a game to him. And obviously he's happy to be caught in the end before like the true finale starts, you know? It lets Batman really bring on his detective skills, something we don't usually get in the Batman films. I mean, it has been dabbled upon for sure. I know that in the Batman Arkham games, that is a big part of the experience, and I appreciate that a lot. So it was really cool to me to see this be a detective story and to see the mystery of this murderer unfold. My thoughts going into this film were that it was perfect, that it was going to be dark and gritty and serious. And once the 3 hours were over, I was extremely happy with this tone. It fits really well. Like I said, it goes along with the whole cinematography, whole atmosphere created in the Batman. And this gritty tone is something that we kind of get in most Batman things on screen nowadays. And I'm always there for it because I think that makes just so much sense for the character of Batman and this Gotham City. The characters really all stand out in this film. So Batman is actually really good. I'm very happy with Pattinson's performance. The brooding, very serious, stoic nature. I don't think the guy ever smiles in the film. Just the way he goes around and is very serious, and he basically, he says he doesn't care what happens to him, and he's just trying to find out the truth of everything, but he doesn't really seem to want to be attached to anybody. He is very alone in this world, and that makes sense. That is Batman kind of at its best. This is a really good interpretation of the character from what I could tell. I'm super satisfied with the results. I think that Robert Pattinson proved his acting chops here would work well for this character. I mean, maybe Christian Bale has a better Bruce Wayne because we got to see that character without the mask on. We got to see him more in the trilogy, but then again, this is only one film, so we'll have to see what happens in the sequels and stuff. But I really am impressed with him as Batman. And when he's fighting, when he's wearing the suit, even when he takes it off and stuff, just all the scenes, he really does a good job. It feels right. He looks right in that role too. And I am a little surprised. Not that I don't think he's a good actor, but I just didn't know exactly how he would deliver on being such an iconic, important character for fiction. And I was pretty happy with how it turned out. Like I said, the detective stuff is done really well. He's really smart, but he's also new to being Batman. He mentions that it's only been 2 years. So in the end, when the plot is not exactly resolved, like there's floods and stuff in the city still, and like he didn't really save everybody, but he did do his duties. You could tell that he's a bit of a new Batman still, and he's new to this. And also you feel like he doesn't care if he goes down. I think that Batman in this film has the moral questions of like whether or not there would ever be the need to save the city if he didn't ever put the suit on in the first place. I'm really excited to see more of Robert Pattinson's interpretation of Batman and how Matt Reeves continues to develop this character and other stories in the potential couple of sequels and spin-off series if he shows up in there as well. It was a Batman-centric story. I think that one comparison I will make to The Dark Knight and The Dark Knight Rises similarly is that those films were sort of led by the villains. I mean, when you think of The Dark Knight, it's obviously an insanely good piece of cinema, but like what makes it so good is honestly Heath Ledger's performance of the Joker. That is just top tier Joker, and that is a villain that really made that film. And while I loved the Riddler and the supporting cast of villains, which I'm going to talk about in a minute, this movie felt like it was about Batman being Batman, and that's kind of like a really big pro in my opinion. But yeah, let's talk about those other characters in this film. Like I said, I think that I was pretty happy with all of them. The Riddler is a sadistic character. If this film was rated R, I think he would have done even more. We would have gotten to see more violence and some more disturbing things, and it would have gone even into more horror. But I was really happy with the results. I kind of talked about it prior. But yeah, I think that Paul Dano gave a really chilling performance of just being this messed up young guy who experienced trauma and is mad and trying to get his own vengeance. And there's obviously that parallel of, him and his people who continue his legacy, if you will, his followers. The one guy in the end of the film says he's vengeance. And obviously that stuck with Bruce because they have their own ideas of trying to get revenge on the bad people, because everyone has their own interpretations of good and evil in this city, in this story, in this world. The other villain that stole the show was Carmine Falcone himself as just the head of everything. Like he has the city in his pocket, politicians and police in his payroll. And I know that their mob stuff is a really important factor of the story of Gotham City. I really love that. The corruption, it's really interesting to me seeing a mob story sort of front and center here, even if it wasn't like a traditional mob story. But I loved the narrative about how the Riddler was trying to expose all these cops and these politicians, the mayor, the DA and stuff, for being corrupt, for being bad, dirty cops. And of course, we would find out that pretty much everybody is operating under Falcone. And he was a really interesting main antagonist that I didn't quite realize. I mean, maybe I just didn't do my due diligence prior to the film, but I didn't know he was going to be like such a main focus. And I'm really happy with that. I think that it made sense the way the story flowed, that Riddler would eventually have him killed, of course, too, which I would have liked to have seen more of Falcone, but I was really happy with what we did get in this movie. John Turturro played as the mob boss, and I thought that he gave a really good performance. I really enjoyed just the way he carried himself and went about, and it felt like a mob boss, and it was done really well. I also enjoy that just the way like the story, the little plot twist where not only is he Selina's father, but also kind of the fact that he was responsible for everything with the death of Thomas Wayne and the death of a lot of people. Just a really great antagonist. And then his right-hand man, Oswald Cobblepot. The Penguin is an iconic Batman character who has been definitely done in some different ways. I actually love what they did with him in The Batman. I thought that Colin Farrell gave a really entertaining performance. This film is not the most funny or sometimes even fun, but when the Penguin was on screen, we got that kind of humor. He was just an entertaining kind of guy. I really liked the way Farrell vocalized the dialogue here. I think that he gave such an excellent performance. The creative team that put the makeup on him and made him look how he did, I mean, that alone was just amazing. And then hearing Farrell speak in such a way that he doesn't normally was really interesting to me. The Penguin seemed like a pretty basic level Penguin compared to what he obviously is in other stories, or what will he become. And I think that they very clearly tease that the Penguin is on the come up. Once the city went into martial law and the floods and everything, they mentioned how people will come up to power, and we saw them showing Oz. And then I believe the series coming to HBO Max eventually, that was greenlit by Warner Brothers, will be telling the story of him on his come up to power, because right now Penguin is sort of on the side, but I know he's got big things coming. And I really enjoyed this character on screen. I really enjoyed the chase scene. I think he's really fun, and I just want more of this character. I want more of this version of the Penguin. I absolutely love what they did with him. I love Colin Farrell in that role. Batman doesn't have too many allies, of course. That's sort of just how he is in general, but he does have Catwoman. And they certainly clash a little bit, but very quickly do they build a little bit of trust, just enough for him to send her, back to the Iceberg Lounge to get some intel for him. And they obviously, quickly get that connection, a romantic, intimate connection between them, but also they're both not exactly 100% sure of one another, even once the film is over with. I really enjoyed the dynamic that they did have. I think that Zoe Kravitz and Robert Pattinson had some pretty good on-screen chemistry. I think that Kravitz did a really great job in this role. I felt like she fits the Selena Kyle that they created really well. She really felt vulnerable as the waitress in the Iceberg Lounge. And I think that she also was clearly a badass as well. And I like that she sort of grew in the film a little bit as she started to find out things and decide who she really wants to be and how she really feels about Falcone. And she wanted to be the one to kill him, of course. The clashing beliefs between Batman and Catwoman made some pretty interesting moments. Overall, they just had a good dynamic, and it was fun seeing the Bat and the Cat. This is a good Selena Kyle and good Catwoman, in my opinion. At the ending, we find out that she is going away. She mentions Bloodhaven, so hopefully we'll get something maybe with Nightwing, eventually in this trilogy or in this series of stories. The portrayal of Alfred Pennyworth that we got from Andy Serkis has potential. I think it was sort of like there wasn't enough of it. He sounded and kind of seemed like a good Alfred. Like I like what we got from Serkis, and I do like him as an actor. I didn't think that we got enough of him. That's kind of one thing I would have liked to have seen more. That also alludes back to what I mentioned, where this was very much about Batman, not Bruce Wayne, if you know what I mean. And I want to see more in the sequel, where we get to see Pattinson with his mask off, maybe doing Bruce Wayne things. And I want to see more of a relationship between him and Alfred, because they definitely established some pretty interesting stuff, especially with Bruce feeling like he was lied to. There was some really good moments, especially when Alfred kind of told Bruce about everything and about how he was basically the father to Bruce Wayne after Thomas and Martha's death, and how he did everything to protect him, this and that. And there was a really good, sort of little monologue in there. I felt like there was a fantastic dynamic between them. So now I want more of Serkis being Alfred, I also feel like I got to touch on more of the main corruption in the city, because I've always enjoyed that in a good Batman story. And I know that I like the show on Fox Gotham that really nailed it, just focusing almost entirely on bad cops and criminals working with the law enforcement and greedy politicians and, people paying people off, stuff like that, and the mob. Like I mentioned about Falcone being really pivotal and really interesting in this movie. Just in general, I liked this whole idea of that. I liked the revelation, especially, I liked all the revelations of all of our main people and, the bad things they did. I would have loved to have heard more about them. And I do think that another show that was greenlit for HBO Max, which is going to be about the the Gotham City Police Department and about Gotham City's corruption. I think we'll get more characters and more people who are bad behind the scenes, and that should be really interesting. I really loved the eventual revelation where, Bruce went back to where it all started, learned the truth also from Falcone afterwards, just about who his parents were and the bad things, and how he learned about what Thomas Wayne did and who he really was. All the paying people off to keep quiet, hush, hush. The money really talked for them, and the lies and them working right alongside criminals, of course, and then the eventual death being inevitable. I know that Bruce Wayne's parents were killed, and I feel like we've seen that and heard about it in a lot of stories, but I love the way they did this because this wasn't a Batman origin story, but it sort of like gave us a lot of hints to the origins without going too deep into Bruce Wayne becoming Batman, but just like the story of the Waynes, because the Waynes are supposed to be really big in this city. Everyone knows them. So I'm really, really satisfied with the results here. And I thought that was really well done and well told. So I want to know more about all this corruption. I think it's super interesting stuff. The Batman is not the most action-packed Batman movie or superhero movie, but like there are multiple scenes where action is on point, and when it is there, it's badass. It's done really well. Fantastic visuals, just, going back to the cinematography and stuff, the lighting in some of these fight scenes, and, Batman being shot at and stuff, and like the fight scene that we see initially in that first trailer that literally, it feels like something out of Batman Arkham games from Rocksteady, which was so cool to me. I play the games and I appreciate them a lot for the action and the feeling of being Batman, and that was super cool. The way Batman fights, the way Pattinson's Batman fights in the Batman is awesome because he is tough. I mean, he's kind of new to it all. He's only 2 years in or so, but he is brutal. And I'm actually surprised that he didn't be the type to kill, even though Batman is not supposed to kill. I think that would have been interesting if like he did kill and then was sort of like learning from that and changing his ways. But this is a tough Batman, and the action is done really well. I mean, there are some really badass moments. I mentioned a couple of the fight scenes. The chase scene too between him and the Penguin was awesome. Love the way that was done. I think the film overall balances some really exciting action scenes with some really chilling, scenes with the Riddler being a sociopath, being a serial killer who is trying to scare people, but also getting so many fans and followers and people to stand by him. So it's like scary to think that happens. And then, you have like your moments of Batman being a badass, Batman being a detective. You have a lot of story being delivered in a really interesting manner. The story doesn't rush itself at all. It's methodical in a great way. The 3-hour runtime, like I talked about it in the beginning of this video, and it is long. And I think a lot of people would probably agree is that once we found out who the Riddler was, once he was at that diner and he let himself get caught, which is weird because they showed that in the trailer and it's so late in the movie, that was kind of like, okay, it felt like the ending, right? And then, Bruce goes as Batman to see him in Arkham. Really fantastic scene between the two of them. That just shows you, Dano really does a good job at being very unnerving and chilling as a psychotic person in here as the Riddler. We find out about the bombs and stuff, and then it goes on a little bit, and that lasts several, 30 to 40 minutes or so. I mean, it felt like the resolution was there and then it continued. I'm happy with the results because I do like the way it ended. And I don't know, I was just like, I felt like the movie didn't feel too long until at that point when it kind of did. Overall, the ending I thought was good. I mean, I'm really excited for Barry Keoghan. I might have pronounced his name wrong as Joker. I don't know. I can't necessarily see him as Joker, but like, I'm excited for the potential. And I know that Joker and Riddler could come together for a really interesting antagonist team up in the sequel or another sequel. I like that Batman and Catwoman did decide to part ways, but you could tell that they both wanted to be together, or really Batman wanted to follow her. And I think that they will definitely connect again in the next movie. What's most exciting to me about the ending is that the city is flooded and it is not looking good, and they're in martial law and stuff. And I could tell that we are going into some sort of no man's land territory here, which I understand is a pretty big story in Batman lore. Like I mentioned earlier, I watched the show Gotham, and I enjoyed, for the most part, that show and the ending where we went into no man's land, and that was really interesting to me, where the city is just kind of cut off. It's its own thing, no in, no out. Criminals really start to rise up. We already talked about how Penguin's probably going to start to come up in power in the sequel or in the show, whichever comes first. And I think that we're going to see a lot of that. And the best thing about Gotham City, and the worst thing if you were living there, is the criminals. There are so many bad people. There's so many people willing to do bad things, crimes happening on a regular basis, even from the good people, the quote unquote good people, you know, all the corruption and stuff. And I think that new criminal empire is rising up and stuff in this possible no man's land territory here could be really interesting. And I'm really excited to see where they go with it, because even though Batman technically got the Riddler in Arkham, Falcone is dead. You know, he sort of solved the issues and felt like he saved the day, and people see him as a hero, which is great. I wouldn't say it's the happiest ending, because not all is resolved. The city is not looking good, and I think that the ending being sort of like a you win some, you lose some, and like not exactly a full conclusion is going to really give us a lot of interesting stories in the sequels and in the HBO Max series that have been greenlit. Overall thoughts, the Batman is cinematic. It's beautiful. It's well written. We've got great talents and a really interesting story that lets all these characters shine. There's some really crazy villains in here and awesome storylines about the corruption in the city, about the mob, and about the police department and the politicians. And it sort of says something about people. And I actually think that it's grounded, and I love that it's grounded, because it just makes it a really good story. It makes it a good film, a good piece of cinema. You know what I mean? Like, I felt like I can almost see all these things in the Batman happening in real life, which is terrifying, but it's not unrealistic. And that makes it all the better, in my personal opinion. So that's why I loved Matt Reeves' The Batman. This film has been hotly anticipated, and I think it really delivered. It's kind of been on my mind all day since it came out, and I'm really happy that I got to do my spoiler-free reaction and then now my spoiler talk, because this is a longer video, but I got a lot of thoughts and I wanted to dive into it. That's going to wrap it up for me, guys. I appreciate your time here. I know it is like a long video, but I think spoiler talks are fun, especially about big movies like this. So did you guys love it as much as I did? What are you excited for the future of this franchise? Let me know all your thoughts about the Batman in the comments below. Consider subscribing if you want to see some more content like this. Thank you so much again. I appreciate your time here, and I'll see you guys all in the next video.
The hell are you supposed to be? I'm vengeance.